My SIL Zara, who has many children, looks down on me because I don't have any. She doesn't do much housework and comes to leave her kids with me, even saying, "We're having a fifth child, so you need to help with living expenses." No, would you still say that if everyone knew the secret about your children? I'm Vivian. I'm 40 years old. I work as an obstetrician gynecologist in a town next to Los Angeles. 5 years ago, I lost my mom, Alice, in a car accident. Now, I live with my dad, Louis. My dad used to work at a law firm until a few years ago. Now he's retired and spends his time managing his assets and enjoying his pension. He's a member of the neighborhood association, where he provides free consultations to residents, just like a former lawyer would, and is well respected. We live in a house with a garden, and we have a relatively comfortable life. I'm an obstetrician gynecologist, but I'm not married and I don't have children. Since I was a teenager, I've had irregular periods, and when I got tested at the age of 20, I found out I was anovulatory. This means that my ovaries don't release eggs, making it difficult to get pregnant. I used to think that falling in love, getting married, and having children was natural, but I learned that infertility, pregnancy troubles, and childbirth complications are common, and that's why I decided to become an obstetrician gynecologist. When I was 27, I fell in love with the heir to a long-established local restaurant, but since he was an only son, I gave up on marriage. I thought it would be difficult to be his wife without being able to provide an heir. He told me, "You don't need to worry about that," and while fertility treatments might have made pregnancy possible, I didn't think I could handle the pressure. I also hesitated to give up my career as an obstetrician gynecologist to become the wife of a restaurant heir. I loved him, but I told myself it wasn't meant to be and we broke up. I don't regret it, but sometimes I feel lonely. I have a younger brother, Marcus, who is 3 years younger than me. He got married to a woman 2 years younger than him 12 years ago, and they live in a nearby condominium. Marcus is the eldest son, and our house is quite large with a garden, so it was an option for my brother and his family to live here, but she didn't like the idea. I thought it was understandable, as living with a MIL and SIL might be challenging. I plan to buy a small condominium and move out when Marcus eventually takes over the house. My brother and his wife have 4 children. Becky, the eldest, is 11, followed by boys who are 9, 5, and 4 years old. I can't show my parents any grandchildren, but my brother and his wife have given them plenty, so I think that's fine in terms of filial duty. However, my relationship with Marcus's wife, Zara, is a bit strained. I work at a well-regarded large hospital in the local area as an obstetrician gynecologist. Zara gave birth at our hospital but refused to have me as her doctor, saying, "I don't want a relative to examine me." I can understand her feelings, so that's fine. I don't want to be examined by an obstetrician gynecologist who can't have children. I overheard her telling a nurse. I think that's going a bit too far. If she says such things, wouldn't that mean all male obstetrician gynecologists are out of the question? Because of this incident, I couldn't hold a good impression of her. In fact, even when Mom was alive, she frequently left her kids with us to go out, saying things like, "Since Vivian can't have children, I'm having them for her, so it's only fair for her to help out a bit." She's the type who makes such insensitive remarks without a second thought. Despite this, my mom adored her grandchildren and doted on them. But then, suddenly, my mom died in a car accident. Zara seemed more upset about losing her babysitter than about her death. "Alice, now that you've died, there's no one to watch my kids," she complained to Marcus at the funeral without shedding a tear. Hearing this, I couldn't help but feel furious. Marcus, dominated by his strong-willed wife, seemed unable to speak his mind. Why do you keep having children if you can't take care of them yourself? I said, raising my voice slightly. Don't be jealous just because you can't have children, Vivian. She retorted with a mocking laugh. That's not what I'm saying. Mom died because she was buying a toy for your child at your request. She could have been the one in the accident instead. Don't you feel any sadness or guilt? That's right. Mom had gone to buy a limited edition toy for my youngest nephew at the request of my brother's family and was hit by a car driven by an elderly person who confused the brake and the accelerator in a parking lot. Well, imagining such what-if scenarios doesn't help. I realized it was pointless to say anything to her. Why would God give children to such a heartless woman? Not that I believe in God, but still. My brother's marriage was a shotgun wedding. Zara was a flashy girl back then. Marcus, who graduated from a prestigious university and worked for a well-known company, seemed an unlikely match for her. But it turned out they met when Marcus was approached by her at a bar during a night out with colleagues. Marcus, not very experienced with women, fell for her easily and ended up getting her pregnant. Marcus, the elite, and Dad, who was still an active lawyer at the time. Despite being hindered by the presence of his SIL and me, I suspect she was after our family's money. With Dad retired and at home more often, she started dumping her kids on us again. Louis must be happy to see his grandchildren, she'd say as she left her youngest, who's in kindergarten, with us. The other kids stay in after-school programs until 11-year-old Becky finishes her classes, and then Becky brings them all home. This is also on her orders. It's really troublesome because there's never any prior notice. Becky and the eldest son are not much trouble, but the 5-year-old and 4-year-old boys are a handful and need constant supervision. Being suddenly told to take care of 4 children is impossible because I'm not at home due to work, and Dad is also at a loss. During such times, he calls me for help during my lunch break. Sometimes, I urgently send a familiar babysitter to our house, and other times, I have Dad bring the kids to the daycare facility at the obstetrics and gynecology clinic where I work. Of course, neither option is free. As expected, Zara has never paid when I send her the bill for these expenses. You're the ones who couldn't take care of them and decided to send them to daycare. This is her reasoning. Becky, unlike her mom, is a reliable and kind child who often takes care of her younger brothers. Aunt Vivian, Grandpa, it's okay. I'll look after my brothers at home, she says, showing her resilience. However, we can't leave a young girl in elementary school to take care of her mischievous younger brothers. There were times when Zara wouldn't come to pick them up even after 8 p.m., and when she didn't answer her phone, I would have to contact Marcus. Sometimes he would come to pick them up after work, and other times we would have them stay overnight. Even so, having a big dinner table with the kids, Dad, and me was enjoyable, and the kids were always delighted with the meals I cooked, exclaiming, "It's a feast." Hey! Can't you do something about your wife? She keeps leaving the kids at our house all the time. It was one thing when Mom was alive, but Dad is really struggling with it. I finally called Marcus over to the house to complain. Marcus, surprised, said, "What? Really? I knew you were looking after them occasionally, but..." It seemed Zara hadn't told him anything about it. She always tells me she's overwhelmed with looking after the kids every day, he said. Occasional babysitting is fine, but 2 or 3 times a week is too much. She isn't even working, is she? She's not working, and she doesn't do much housework either, Marcus said, looking like he was about to cry. Even after coming home tired from work, the house would be a mess. Dinner wouldn't be prepared, and the kids would be running wild. She would say, "I'm too busy taking care of the kids." leaving him unable to say anything back. Indeed, Marcus has lost a lot of weight since he got married. Zara, on the other hand, gains weight with each child she has. It might be easy to say that he chose this kind of woman, but I truly felt sorry for him in this situation. I made up my mind to tell him something I had been thinking for a while. Listen, I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but I don't think your third and fourth sons look like you. As an obstetrician, I've seen many parents, grandparents, and relatives, and there are plenty of children who don't look like their parents. Even if they don't look alike, they often resemble a grandparent or have similar ear shapes or hand and foot shapes. When relatives gather, there is a sense of family resemblance. Genetics are truly amazing. Becky and the eldest son clearly feel like they are part of my family. But with the third and fourth sons, I just didn't get that feeling. After listening to me, Marcus was silent for a while. Finally, he spoke. Well, to tell the truth, I've thought the same thing. He said with a pained expression. Let's do a DNA test. I suggested, and Marcus nodded silently. The DNA test results revealed that the third and fourth sons were not Marcus's children. We also tested Becky and the eldest son, and they were indeed Marcus's children. Although I had anticipated this, it was still a shock. It must have been even more devastating for Marcus. I've heard about this happening to others, but I never thought it would happen to me, he said, burying his head in his hands. As an obstetrician, I occasionally encounter situations where the parents' and child's blood types don't match. However, as doctors, we only support childbirth and don't go out of our way to say, this child isn't your husband's. The truth might come out someday, but that's a matter for the couple to deal with. Unaware of the situation unfolding behind the scenes, Zara came to our house with Marcus, bringing the 4 children with them. It wasn't a conversation for the children to hear, so I asked Becky to take them upstairs to play. Hello. I came with some good news. I'm 3 months pregnant, Zara announced proudly, even flashing a peace sign and glancing at me. Louis, Vivian, you have money, right? You don't have any kids, so you don't have anything to spend it on. We're having a 5th child, so you can help us with living expenses, she said, with astonishing audacity. Not only did she try to burden us with childcare, but now she was asking for financial support as well. If you refuse, you won't get to see your grandchildren. Just kidding, Zara said, believing that a grandfather would naturally dote on his grandchildren. Sure, grandchildren are precious, if they're truly your grandchildren. For the usually mild-tempered dad to show anger was a rare sight. He said firmly, Then we don't need to see them. What? What are you talking about? It's because your son's income is poor that I'm asking for help. Don't you care about your grandchildren? She retorted. However, Marcus's income shouldn't be that bad. With many children, it's challenging, but we've given considerable amounts as birth gifts, and Mom had also left some money for Marcus. Hey, is the child you're carrying mine? Marcus asked, his voice laced with anger. What? What are you saying? Of course it is, Zara brazenly retorted. But when Marcus spread the divorce papers on the table, her eyes widened in shock. No way! What's this? Stop joking around. I'm pregnant, you know? She believed that using the children as a shield would always get her what she wanted. Shall we do a DNA test on the fetus? I suggested, spreading out the DNA test results we already had. Zara's face turned pale instantly. What is this? When did you? She started to say something ridiculous, grasping at straws. Vivian must have fabricated this. This is harassment. She's always been jealous of me because she can't have children. Even if I were jealous, what would I gain from fabricating such a thing? Don't insult her. You've given birth to these children, failed to properly care for them, relied on Mom, Dad, and Vivian for help, neglected housework, and left the house in disarray. You dumped the kids here. Where were you and what were you doing during the day? Tell me. Marcus, usually as mild-mannered as Dad, was genuinely angry, something I hadn't seen since elementary school. Where? Shopping, going out with friends, and… Zara stammered, trying to justify herself. Dad spoke up. If you have anything to say it now. If you don't want a divorce, you can go to mediation or court. But know that you have a 0% chance of winning. Even if Dad weren't a former lawyer, he would still say the same. The problem lies with the 4 children. It's hard to imagine Zara taking all of them and raising them. On the other hand, it would be painful for Marcus to take care of the 2 younger children who aren't his. Still, even if they're not my biological children, I've raised them up to now and grown attached. I don't want to do anything that would make them unhappy, he said. If we left it to her, who knows what would happen to the kids? They might end up in a facility. Dad, Marcus, and I had many discussions leading up to this day. Fine. I'll divorce him. Poor kids, Zara exclaimed, seemingly oblivious to her own role in the situation. Yes, it's unfortunate for the kids since they can't choose their mom, I remarked. What? You weren't even an option in the first place. She snapped back, her words cutting deep. Her sharp tongue and deflection of blame were astounding. However, just giving birth doesn't make one a mom. Raising and nurturing the children is what truly makes a mom. This woman had no right to call herself one. Anyway, the kids won't be left to suffer. I'll take the 2 older ones, Marcus declared. And I'll adopt the 2 younger ones, I added. Zara, everyone except you will live here together. That's our decision. We can't take care of the child you're carrying, but we will ensure the happiness of the children upstairs, Dad stated firmly. Surprisingly, Zara responded nonchalantly. Fine. All right then. She signed the divorce papers and exclaimed, "Ah, I feel so relieved," before leaving. What kind of woman was she? She didn't show any regret or remorse despite losing custody of her 4 children. Occasionally, tragic stories about negligent parents make the news. Perhaps she was one of those types. Thinking about it, if Marcus hadn't been a kind-hearted, somewhat timid, and reasonably well-off man, the outcome could have been much worse. The thought was chilling. The remaining issue was explaining the situation to the children. Regardless of the reason, learning that their mom had abandoned them would undoubtedly be a shock. We called the kids downstairs and had them sit on the living room sofa. They seemed to sense that something serious was happening, all wearing somber expressions. Dad and Mom are getting a divorce, Marcus began. You all will live here with Dad, he continued. We didn't mention the adoption of the younger 2. In reality, they would all be living here together, and Marcus would still be their dad. Marcus genuinely didn't want to make the children unhappy, but it would be too harsh to expect him to raise children he had no blood relation to without any concern. I suggested the adoption to lighten his emotional burden, even if just a little. Additionally, I might have wanted to experience parenthood myself. We could tell the children the truth when they grew up. Really? This will be our home, so it means we won't get hit or kicked by Mom anymore, Becky said, looking relieved. Oh my! I didn't realize that. I'm so sorry. Marcus said, hugging the children tightly. Dad works hard, so we shouldn't make him worry. And if I tattled, Mom would get even angrier, she said, having endured while taking care of her younger brothers. Despite her maturity, she was still just a child. Finally feeling safe, she clung to Marcus and started crying loudly. Is Aunt Vivian going to be our mom? One of the boys asked. I like Auntie's meatloaf. Another chimed in. I like her pancakes too. The third added. Compared to Becky, the three boys were carefree. I'm your dad's sister, so I won't really be mom, I said. We were definitely going to be a patchwork family. But I was determined to make these kids happy. I made a tough decision. I quit my job. I had found meaning and pride in my work as an obstetrician, but now I wanted to prioritize these 4 children. I might not be able to be their mom, but I could be an aunt like their mom. Zara must not have had the money to move out. For a while, she lived alone in the condominium where she had lived with Marcus and the children. About 3 months later, when she couldn't pay the rent anymore, she came crying to us for help. Despite her audacity, given that she should have been the one paying compensation to Marcus in the divorce, I was more shocked by her appearance. Her belly wasn't showing at all. You should be 6 months along by now, right? What happened? I found myself asking, even though I didn't want to speak to her. Oh, I decided not to have it. I can't raise a child on my own, she said nonchalantly. Whether it was Marcus's child or someone else's, I didn't know. But my heart ached. What did she think life was? I'm not lending money to someone like you. I don't want you to ever see the children again. If you come around here again, I'll call the police, I told her before sending her away. About 2 busy yet joyful years had passed since we started living with the children. One day, while shopping with Marcus and the kids at a mall, a former colleague from the hospital I used to work at approached me. He was now running his own practice. Sensing it might be a complicated conversation, I asked Marcus and the kids to go ahead without me. Prefacing with the fact that he was bound by confidentiality, the doctor told me about Zara's recent activities. Apparently, she had avoided going to the hospital where I worked and had visited his clinic instead. Although he knew Zara was Marcus's wife, her last name change clued him in that she had divorced. Zara had been coming to his clinic repeatedly due to infections, and when she came asking for another pregnancy termination, the doctor had finally admonished her. But my boyfriend doesn't like it, she had said. I couldn't understand why she would stay with a man who transmitted diseases and refused to use contraception. He's really awesome in bed, she had laughed. Some women prioritize men over their children. The doctor had warned her that she might become infertile if she continued down this path, but I thought, you brought this on yourself. Maybe it was for the best. She was already in her late 30s, and her future didn't seem bright. But she was now a complete stranger to our family. I decided to keep this information to myself since it would only upset Marcus. Thanking the doctor, I headed back to join Marcus and the kids at the mall, feeling somber. When we returned home, the kids were acting a bit secretive. Thinking the boys might be planning another prank, I started preparing dinner. Let's eat, I said, sitting at the table. Wait a moment, Becky exclaimed, giving her older brother Paul a signal. Paul retrieved a white box from behind the sofa and placed it on the table. Vivian, today's your birthday, right? It was a whole cake they had saved their allowances to buy. I had completely forgotten my own birthday. At 42, birthdays weren't particularly thrilling, but the kids' gesture touched me deeply. If it's okay, can we call you Mom from today? Becky asked. What? I was taken aback. You feel more like Mom than Aunt Vivian, she explained. I was too surprised to respond immediately. Yes, of course, you can. The 4 children exclaimed in unison. Yay! Happy birthday, Mom! Tears streamed down my face. Tears of joy. It was the best birthday present I could have ever received. They also gave me 4 letters addressed to Mom. Glancing sideways, I saw that both Dad and Marcus were tearing up. The children were growing up to be such wonderful kids. Our patchwork family might be a bit unconventional, but we were happy. Finally done. I never realized funerals could be this exhausting. It's our son's funeral, for heaven's sake. Why would you say that? I'm just stating the facts. We're not the only ones here, you know. Surely, I must be included in that. In the first place, it's partly her fault that boy died. Catherine, my mother-in-law, never looked kindly upon me since we got married. But blaming me even for David's death. Shouldn't we be grieving for David and reminiscing about him? The complaints towards me never cease. Edward, my father-in-law, tries to mediate, but Catherine remains unmoved. If only you hadn't married her. My boy wouldn't have taken his own life. He should have been holding his child by now. I clenched my fists as tightly as I could. Frustration and anger welled up inside me. Catherine had treated me with disdain until we left the funeral home. When I got home, I was so tired that I fell asleep. As if I forgot everything. And then the next morning. Can you get the newspaper quickly? Yes. Hurry up. I wished it was just a dream. As I was told, I went to check the mailbox. I found an envelope tucked in with the newspaper. An envelope? Who could it be from? I took it out and checked the sender, but there was no name. There was just one sentence. Make sure Mom doesn't notice. With that, I understood who it was for and who it was from. I hid the envelope in my pocket and went back inside. What were you doing? You're useless. She snatched the newspaper from my hand. I sneaked back to the bedroom and opened the envelope. Inside, written in familiar handwriting, was something shocking. When I finished reading it, I felt like I was going to explode with anger and fear. I struggled to control my trembling body and took a deep breath. Just you wait and see. I immediately began to take action. My name is Lavinia, and I am just an ordinary housewife. I met my husband David in college, and we quickly became close. Since we first met, David had a strong desire to leave his parents' house as soon as possible. You don't have to rush so much, you know? No, I can't stand being dependent on my parents any longer. But we're still students. That's why. We have so much time now, I want to do everything I can. On the other hand, I was fully prepared to rely on my parents while I was in college. Being in the same department and major, it was natural for us to start dating. When we were juniors, David finally put his plan into action. It's going to get busy from now on. Can you help me? Of course. What do you need me to do? Thanks. First, let's. David's plan was to start a company while still in school. He had told me his reasons before, but another reason was that he was set to join his father-in-law's company after graduation. He wanted to make his own future decisions. A month later, we successfully established the company. It's just the beginning, but we've finally taken the first step. Thanks. What are you talking about? It's too early for thanks. The hard part is yet to come. True. I'll be counting on you. Leave it to me. David, a few others, and I created a startup. The company aimed to run a media platform that provided various types of information. From entertainment like games and comics to life hacks, we covered a wide range of media. But David was particularly focused on a website that provided information about adoption. By the way, I've always wanted to ask, why did you start the adoption site? My friend from high school was adopted. As I heard more about it, I became interested. Usually, the focus is on those who adopt, but the adoptees have their own thoughts too, right? Now that you mention it, that's true. So, I wanted to help. David continued to run the site almost single-handedly. The company continued to do well, thanks to the wealth of information, accuracy, and above all, the humor David valued. It even got small mentions in magazines. But one day, just before graduation, you don't seem very cheerful today. Yeah, actually, I told my parents about the company yesterday, and they got really angry. Why? I guess they wanted me to get a proper job. Especially Mom, she was really upset. After that, David often had a gloomy look on his face. Sometimes, he couldn't sleep until morning and had to get sleeping pills from the doctor. Seeing David like this, I decided I would support him for the rest of my life. The day before graduation, David somehow managed to persuade his parents, and I saw a genuine smile on his face for the first time in a long while. Finally, I'm free. Now you can live just for yourself. About that, would you move in with me? Yes, of course. We started living together, and both our work and private lives were fulfilling. That lifestyle continued for about 4 years, and then it was my birthday. Happy birthday! Thank you. It doesn't matter how many times you say it, it always makes me happy. Hearing that makes me happy too. So, David's face turned unusually serious as he pulled a small box from his pocket and placed it on the table. What's this? I want you to marry me. When David opened the box, there was a small, sparkling ring inside. Of course, I had made up my mind long before. The pleasure is all mine. He took my hand and slipped the ring on my finger. It fit perfectly. But there was one thing that caught my attention. Why is the box a little crooked? Oh, I was trying to decide when to give it to you. I've been holding it in my pocket and it ended up like this. He must have been that nervous. Hearing that made me love David even more. The only problem was introducing him to my parents. Are you okay? I'm fine. No, actually, I'm nervous. I'm with you. Yeah. We introduced David to my parents first, and they accepted him without any issues. And today, we were going to meet his parents. Since leaving the house, David had been a bit unsettled. What are you doing back here? This is my home, isn't it? Fine, coming quickly. Seeing their interaction, I started to worry if everything would be all right. When we were shown into the living room, Edward and an unfamiliar girl were sitting on the sofa. Welcome back, David. Have a seat. Catherine served coffee, but there wasn't any for me. Maybe I wasn't welcome. To get straight to the point, I want to marry Lavinia. I see. You're at that age now. Marriage? I won't allow it. Why not? Marrying a woman you don't know. Calm down. But David has made his decision. It's not for us to interfere. Finally, with Edward's persuasion, we were allowed to marry. Then, the girl sitting next to Edward spoke up. Congratulations on your marriage, bro. Thanks, Wilhelmina. Lavinia, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too. We believed we were going to lead a happy life together. However, it didn't last long. It was on the way home after the greetings. So, you have a sister? Yeah. But you don't look much alike. I'm an only child, so I don't really understand. We don't look alike, huh? You don't? Sorry, it's nothing. Let's just get home quickly. Yeah. I thought David looked a bit surprised in this moment. Later, our marriage certificate was accepted, and we became officially married. We were overjoyed, but our honeymoon phase ended after just 1 week. Catherine, what are you doing here? I have something important to discuss. I'm coming in. Wait a minute. Catherine barged in without waiting for an answer. She threw open the living room door with force. Why are you here? Isn't that a bit rude? So, what's the matter? Well, after you visited, Dad's health took a turn for the worse. Dad? Yes. Catherine said Edward had been having health issues for a while. Judging by David's expression, he hadn't known about this. Then Catherine dropped a bombshell. He was diagnosed with cancer. What? Dad wants to recuperate at home, but it's just me and Wilhelmina at the house. So you want us to move in? Yes, exactly. The creepy smile on Catherine's face gave me chills. It was clear David was torn. Even in college, he had a strong desire to leave home as soon as possible. But with Edward in this condition, it was understandable that he was conflicted. As David hesitated, she turned to me. What do you think? Me? I never expected her to ask me. I wasn't prepared at all. Well, Don't tell me you're going to abandon us? Of course not. Then what? A normal person would answer immediately. As Catherine berated me, David came to my defense. Don't blame Lavinia. We'll move in. Good. I'll let Dad know. See you. Catherine left, looking satisfied. Once she was gone, David held his head in his hands. I'm sorry. This is all my fault. Don't apologize. It's not your fault, David. Just when things were looking up. Why does something always get in my way? What do you mean? Whenever things are about to go well, something happens. I'm here with you. Okay? Yeah, you're right. We quickly terminated the lease on the apartment we had rented for our newlywed life and prepared to move in with his family. From Catherine's attitude towards me, it was clear that the future would not be bright. And so, our cohabitation began. Thank you for coming. I'm looking forward to living here. First, I need you to do something, Lavinia. What is it? My back has been hurting lately. Could you clean the house? We hadn't even unpacked yet. Hurry up. Don't just stand there. From then on, I was at her beck and call. David helped too, but Catherine didn't seem to care at all. After a week of living together, I noticed something. This family revolved around Wilhelmina. Even though David was their blood relative, he often felt like an outsider. Edward and Wilhelmina both seemed somewhat weary of Catherine's antics. Have you figured out this household? Yeah, I think I have. That's why I didn't want to come back here. So, what does Wilhelmina think about all this? I don't know. We've lived as siblings, but I honestly can't tell what she's thinking. Really? Wilhelmina was always kind and friendly to me. As David said, it seemed like Wilhelmina was harboring some dark feelings. Meanwhile, I was tasked with taking care of Edward. And what was Catherine doing? Absolutely nothing. Edward is calling for you. Go to him quickly. Yes. I took a deep breath before entering the room. What do you need? I need a little help with something. As I approached Edward, he reached out and grabbed my butt. What are you doing? Don't be so upset. This is just family bonding. Absolutely not. Catherine had said Edward was weakened by cancer treatment. But he didn't seem weak at all. He grabbed my arm with surprising strength and tried to push me down. Stop it. Are you sure? If David finds out about this, it'll be a disaster. With that one sentence, I hesitated for a moment. Edward took advantage of my hesitation and tried to undress me. Realizing the danger, I pushed him away with all my strength. Just then, Catherine walked in. What are you doing? Edward tried to push me down. Catherine, you know I wouldn't do such a thing. Please believe me. I had asked the wrong person for help. How could you go after your father-in-law when you have a husband? What kind of woman are you? No, I didn't. If you don't want David to find out, you'd better do as we say. It was a trade-off. Even though it was Edward's fault, I didn't want David to know about this. All right. It wasn't until much later that I realized this was their plan all along. Edward didn't touch me directly after that, but the fear that he might was always there. I couldn't concentrate at work, and I started making mistakes. You seem tired lately. Are you okay? Yeah. Maybe you should take a break. But don't worry about work. It's not that. Is it Mom and Dad? I'll handle them. At David's suggestion, I left my job and became a housewife. Staying at home all the time was mentally and physically exhausting, but I didn't want to waste David's consideration. David told Catherine and Edward not to overburden me. Things got a little better, but the harassment didn't stop completely. If you're staying home, you should be more useful. More useful? Just follow my instructions. Catherine handed me a piece of paper. It was a list of things she wanted me to buy. Today? Of course. Hurry up if you don't want David to find out. I had no choice. The list included items from the local supermarket as well as a specific cake Catherine loved, which required a train ride to get. Oh, and you'll be paying for it yourself, of course. It was already past 12 p.m., and I had to hurry to be back before David returned home. All I could think about was not causing trouble. I didn't get back until 7 p.m. I bought everything. Why did it take so long? Even a child could do this faster. Just get out of my sight. I went to my room and lied on the bed. I wondered what I was doing with my life. As I stared at the ceiling, there was a knock on the door. I sat up and answered. The door opened slowly, and Wilhelmina stood there. Wilhelmina, what's wrong? I'm sorry. What? I should have been more careful. What are you talking about? About Dad and Mom. My heart nearly stopped. Oh, you don't have to hide it. You knew? I overheard them talking. I see. I'll protect you, Lavinia. I can't let you do that, Wilhelmina. Leave it to me. I've got a plan. But David... I was determined to keep this from David at all costs. Don't worry about that. With Wilhelmina aware of the situation, I felt less alone. I had been feeling isolated, but not anymore. Then Wilhelmina said something surprising when we were all together. I'm going to work at Bro's company. What? You go to a good university. You could get a better job. I've made my decision. Wilhelmina was set to graduate next year. She was so talented that she could easily get a job anywhere, just as Catherine said. Why David's company? At least go to Dad's company. Mom, it's decided. Wilhelmina wants this. But... Edward whispered something to Catherine. All right, maybe that's a good idea. She changed her mind suddenly. I wondered what Edward had said. And David, take care of Wilhelmina. Of course. What kind of answer is that? Seriously. After graduating from college, Wilhelmina joined David's company. Being naturally intelligent and talented, Wilhelmina quickly took on various responsibilities. Around this time, Edward started being unusually kind to me. Given what had happened before, it filled me with fear again. However, something surprising happened. Lavinia, I'm truly sorry for what I did. An apology now doesn't change anything. I know, but I'll talk to Mom and make sure it doesn't happen again. I'm really sorry. I couldn't believe what was happening in front of me. Edward even made a deep apology. I mean it. Please stop. I still don't trust you. I'll need some time to see if things really change. All right, I understand. Despite being so capable, Wilhelmina could have easily gotten a better job, just as Catherine said. But this peace was just the calm before the storm. Though the harassment stopped, David's behavior started to change. You're working too much lately. It's a crucial time right now. Maybe, but this is too much. I have to do everything I can now. Even so. David wouldn't stop. Wilhelmina and I talked about this strange situation. What is David trying to achieve? I know he's focused on work, but... I'm sorry, I don't know either. But this can't go on. Yeah, we need to do something about it. We continued to tell David to rest more. But he threw himself into his work as if trying to escape something. He also started increasing his intake of sleeping pills. I knew something had to be done, and then I got sad news from Dad. Mom had been in a car accident and passed away. Please come home immediately. I understand. I was worried about David, but I couldn't bring him in his current state. With all that's happened, please take care of David. Yes, I'll take care of him. So, I returned to my family home. Seeing Mom's cold body, all I could feel was a sense of disbelief. Had Mom done something wrong? Thanks for coming back. Of course. By the way, where's David? David is. I explained David's situation to Dad. I see. I can't believe David. I'm worried about him, but we need to properly send off Mom first. You're right. We quickly prepared for Mom's funeral. At times like these, people usually cry, but I couldn't shed a tear. When the funeral began, I felt more empty than sad. I couldn't accept the reality that Mom was gone. Before I knew it, the funeral was over. Are you all right? Yeah, but I still can't believe Mom is gone. Me neither. The house feels empty without her constant energy. That's because you were always getting into trouble, and she was scolding you. Was I? Yes, you were. That night, Dad and I reminisced about Mom until late. We must have fallen asleep on the sofa because the morning light was already coming in. Did you sleep well? Yes. Lavinia, you should go back now. What? David is waiting for you. You should go to him. But... It's okay. Mom would want you to. All right, I'll go. As I stood up to prepare, my smartphone rang. Who's calling this early? It was Wilhelmina. Hello? Wilhelmina, is something wrong? It's Bro. What happened to David? He didn't wake up, so I went to his room. I left the house immediately and headed to the hospital. Lavinia. Wilhelmina ran towards me as soon as she saw me. Wilhelmina. She was crying heavily. Where's David? She pointed to where my in-laws were standing. I helped Wilhelmina sit on a nearby sofa and slowly approached them. I opened the door slowly and saw someone lying down. There were 2 police officers in the room. Are you his wife?
Yes. What happened to David?
There is a possibility of suicide.
Suicide? That can't be.
I walked on trembling legs. There lay David, looking as if he were merely sleeping. Reality suddenly hit me, and I collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut. Wilhelmina came over, lifted me up, and led me out of the room. Why would David?
I don't know. I can't understand it either.
According to Wilhelmina, when David didn't get up at his usual time, she went to check on him and found him lying in bed, already gone. They called an ambulance, but it was too late. The police were called, and they suspected suicide. They found a lot of empty sleeping pill containers in the trash can. The family was questioned by the police, but they hadn't seen David since he went into his room.
This can't be. Sure, he was struggling, but he wouldn't leave us like this.
I know, right? I think the same. The autopsy confirmed that David had taken a large amount of sleeping pills, leading to his death. The pills were properly prescribed, and David had been seeing a doctor. Still grieving Mom's death, I now had to attend David's funeral. Just like with Mom, I couldn't cry. This time, though, the reason was different. I desperately wanted to know why this had happened. After the funeral, while resting in the lounge. Finally, it's over. Funerals are so exhausting.
It's our son's funeral. How can you say that?
I'm just stating a fact.
We're not the only ones here.
She probably meant me too. Anyway, it's partly this woman's fault that he died. How could it be my fault? I thought she had calmed down lately, but her core real attitude hadn't changed. Shouldn't she be mourning David's death and reflecting on his life? Yet, she kept criticizing me. Edward tried to calm her down, but it didn't work. If he hadn't married you, he wouldn't have done this. We could have had grandchildren by now. Wilhelmina, returning from the restroom, jumped into the fray.
That's impossible.
Wilhelmina, do you have complaints about me too?
Complaints? Of course I do. Do you know how badly you treated Bro? What are you saying, Wilhelmina?
It's not Lavinia's fault. Bro died because of you too. Wilhelmina stormed out. What are you doing? Go after her. You're useless even now. I clenched my fists as tightly as I could. Frustration and anger welled up inside me. Catherine continued to look down on me until we left the funeral home. Ignoring her, I chased after Wilhelmina and found her sitting on a bench in a nearby park. There you are, Wilhelmina. Let's go home and figure out what happened to David together. Okay. When we got home, I was so exhausted that I fell asleep immediately. As if I forget everything. And then the next morning. Can you get the newspaper quickly? Even though the funeral had just ended, there was no sign of grief. It felt like a normal morning. Yes. Hurry up. I could have refused, but my body moved out of habit. I wished it was just a dream. As instructed, I went to check the mailbox. I found an envelope tucked in with the newspaper. An envelope? Who could it be from? I took it out and checked the sender, but there was no name. There was just one sentence. Make sure Mom doesn't notice. With that, I understood who it was for and who it was from. I hid the envelope in my pocket and went back inside. What were you doing? You're useless. She snatched the newspaper from my hand. I sneaked back to the bedroom and opened the envelope. Inside, written in familiar handwriting, was something shocking. When I finished reading it, I felt like I was going to explode with anger and fear. I struggled to control my trembling body and took a deep breath. Just you wait and see. I immediately began to take action. I went straight to Wilhelmina's room. "Lavinia, please come in." She had dark circles under her eyes and swollen lids, likely from crying all night. "Sorry to bother you, but I need you to see something." I showed her the letter from David.
This is... Maybe he anticipated this outcome. So he planned to die from the start?
The letter began. "By the time you read this, Lavinia, I might not be alive. I wanted to stay with you forever, but I couldn't bear it anymore." The letter contained even more shocking revelations. Apparently, Edward's company was struggling financially. He had suggested handing the company over to Wilhelmina. It seemed they intended to use Wilhelmina to secure funding.
If this is true, did I make things worse?
No, you didn't. They were reluctant at first. That's why they suddenly changed their minds.
What? Edward probably thought that if Wilhelmina joined David's company, it would solve their problems since she was family.
That's awful. Edward must have whispered this plan to Catherine when she reacted at that time.
I wanted to cause them trouble. I suspected Dad's company was struggling.
It's not your fault, Wilhelmina. You were trying to help me. But still. The letter ended with, "I never told you, but I'm adopted." My position worsened after Wilhelmina was born. I'm sorry I kept it a secret. Please tell Wilhelmina that she was always my pride and joy. Even though I resented her birth at times, she was the sister I loved dearly. How much did you know about the adoption?
I didn't know anything. My parents never told me.
I started to remember our college days. The friend who was adopted was David himself. No wonder he knew so much about adoption. He probably wanted to prevent others from experiencing what he did. But now, the problem was what to do next. I felt so sorry for David. I needed to get back at his parents somehow. Then Wilhelmina remembered something.
How could I forget this? I'm so stupid.
What did you think of?
When I said I would protect you, Lavinia, I installed surveillance cameras in the house.
Surveillance cameras?
Yes, they're very small, so no one noticed.
Can we see the footage now?
Yes, we can.
The footage showed the two of them verbally abusing David in the living room. Calling him useless, saying they should never have adopted him. It went on for hours.
How did I not notice this?
As we checked more footage, we found damning evidence. I felt an anger I had never experienced before. Wilhelmina seemed to feel the same. We prepared and confronted the in-laws. Can we talk for a moment? What? I'm busy. It won't take long.
Did you two kill Bro?
What are you talking about?
That's enough. Stop joking around. You can't escape this.
You don't have any proof. The police said it was suicide.
That's right. Even if Wilhelmina is our daughter, this is unacceptable. How can you say that? Look at this.
Wilhelmina had prepared a laptop. It showed footage from the day David died.
You didn't notice, did you? Bro and I placed cameras all over the house.
What? I checked the camera footage as mentioned in the letter. It clearly showed them forcing David to take pills. Other footage showed them putting what seemed to be sleeping pills in his drinks, leaving him dazed and vulnerable.
How? We set up cameras. Dad!
Edward tried to stand up, but I stopped him.
Sorry, but it's too late to run. What?
We heard police sirens approaching. Give it up. The in-laws were taken away by the police. Of course, this isn't the end of everything. But I felt a little lighter inside. They were charged with murder using the camera footage as evidence. I shuddered to think what would have happened if Wilhelmina hadn't set up the cameras.
Are you okay, Wilhelmina?
I'm fine.
But your parents.
They're not parents. They're just criminals. As a result, Edward's company went bankrupt. It was already in a state where it could have collapsed at any moment, so it was just a matter of time. Both were found guilty and are now behind bars. I decided to visit them to see their faces. I also discovered that Edward's cancer was a lie. He made it up as an excuse to have us live with them. Fittingly, he was too ill to meet, but I was able to see Catherine. You look well.
What do you want?
Just checking in. How's prison?
What?
I hope you die easily here.
You're such a hateful woman.
I'll take that as a compliment. Keep surviving as best you can. Goodbye. I returned to the in-laws' house one last time. Wilhelmina and I prepared to move. I still can't believe David was adopted.
He's still my beloved bro.
Yes, it doesn't change anything. We moved into a new place and lived together. I took over as president of David's company. Wilhelmina and I would carry David's legacy together until we could smile and reunite with him one day. Violet, today's a family trip, okay? So we're going to have fun just with the family. As I stood there, speechless, unable to respond to my husband Frank, my mother-in-law Chanel spoke up. You really can't take a hint, can you? Stupidity must run in the family. Oh, how dreadful. What kind of upbringing did your mother provide you with? I really despise dealing with such stupid poor people. Did you actually think you could become part of our family? I've mentioned this before, haven't I? I'm not opposed to the idea of divorce. So, please go ahead and divorce Frank. It's a good thing you haven't had any children yet. Upon hearing Chanel's words, I opened the envelope Frank had given me. Inside was a completed divorce application form. When we got married,
Your smile is the best bouquet for me, Violet,
Frank had said, slipping a silver ring onto my ring finger. I thought I could have a happy life with him. Chanel insulted my mother. She has no idea how my mother struggled to raise me and provide me with an education. My father-in-law Alex insulted my dad. He measured him by his own standards, unjustly judging his character. The Frank who used to send me bouquets on my birthday every year is gone. I've taken your love letters to heart. What day is today, Frank? You don't remember, do you? I didn't want to receive such a love letter on this day. But is that really what you think? Have you ever considered what you truly want? Either way, you've chosen your parents. That's all there is to it. Goodbye. Go to hell on that plane. I will never forgive you. I am Violet Miller, 35 years old. My parents divorced when I was in high school, and I've lived with my mom ever since. However, my mother passed away from an illness when I was 32. Then, 2 years ago, I happened to marry Frank, a year older than me. I met Frank while working a part-time job as a waitress at a nightclub. After losing my mother, I was in dire need of money. Despite my anxieties, I had no other choice but to dive into the nightlife. Frank was a customer there. Initially, he was brought along by an acquaintance, but eventually, he started coming by himself. Frank seemed to take a particular liking to me, visiting daily to see me. Violet, you're the closest to my ideal woman I've ever met, he would say, drinking expensive liquor. He was a generous customer, and I learned that his father owned a company, with Frank being the heir apparent. Frank, with his gentle and laid-back demeanor, was popular at the club. After receiving strong advances from him, I quit my job at the club and started dating Frank. A year after we met, we got married. During our courtship and early marriage, Frank always made sure to give me large bouquets on anniversaries. Not just on birthdays and wedding anniversaries, but also on the day we first met and our first date. Frank considered them all memorable occasions. Frank was somewhat elusive, but I loved his kindness and slightly pretentious side. When we got married, "Your smile is the best bouquet for me, Violet," he said, placing a silver ring on my finger. I thought I could have a happy life with him. But one day, I was faced with a shocking truth.
"Violet, I guess you're my second favorite in the world,"
Frank casually mentioned during dinner one evening. I had felt something was off since that morning, as Frank seemed unusually happy. Though it didn't seem to be for any special anniversary. Curious about his excitement, I asked, "Is something good happening?" And that was his response.
"My favorites are Mom and Dad. They love me the most in the world."
It's not bad to cherish one's parents. In fact, I hoped he would. However, hearing a nearly 36-year-old Frank refer to them as Mom and Dad was a bit off-putting to me. Frank continued with an unabashedly happy smile.
"Mom and Dad are going to live with us. You're happy about this, right? It's going to be fun from now on."
Reacting to Frank's words,
"What?"
I inadvertently exclaimed. In fact, Frank's parents had been opposed to our marriage. Alex is the president of a company passed down from the previous generation, and Frank has been promised the position of the next president. Alex and Chanel seemed displeased that the wife of the future president comes from a single-parent family. I thought they rejected me because I had worked in the nightlife district, but apparently that wasn't an issue for them. After all, Chanel herself had worked in the nightlife before Alex took a fancy to her and married her. When I met them once for a marriage introduction, I was flatly denied.
"Marriage is a vow to devote your true heart to your partner for life. Divorce is out of the question."
After being told that, I was left speechless. So why, I wonder, have Frank's parents now decided to move in with us?
I don't really know, but maybe they've accepted us?"
Frank says with a carefree laugh, but I'm filled with nothing but anxiety. I was never told about living together, nor did Frank consult me about it. If Frank's parents have accepted our marriage, that would be wonderful. But living together changes things. I believe we should gradually build a relationship with his parents, have discussions, and agree on living together. However, the words that came out of Frank's mouth were so shocking that they robbed me of all my words.
"So, they're moving in tomorrow. Can you clean up the upstairs room, please?"
Hearing that, I dropped the spoon I was holding and didn't even notice. The next evening, Frank's parents really did come to our house. I went to the entrance to greet them. "Alex, Chanel, it's been a while. Please, make yourselves at home." I greeted them politely, but there was no response from Alex and Chanel. When I looked up, Alex and Chanel were already gone, apparently having hurried into the house. Rushing after them, I found a touching reunion taking place in the living room. "Frank, I've missed you. Are you okay? Have you been eating properly? No one's been mean to you, have they?" Wondering what they could mean by mean, I watched the parent-child reunion scene with a smile. Chanel was hugging Frank tightly. Frank seemed happy, patting Chanel on the back. "I'm being fed, at least. But nothing beats Mom's cooking, right? You're making dinner today, aren't you?" Frank was being as affectionate with Chanel as a child. Is this really how a nearly 40-year-old man should act, even if they haven't seen each other in a while?
"Of course. Let's enjoy dinner as a family today."
Hearing this, Frank cheered, and Alex spoke up. "Frank, it looks like the branch is doing well. I'm glad I left it to you." Alex runs the main company, and since Frank works at a branch, it seems they didn't see each other much.
Yeah, everything's going smoothly. I don't have to do anything. Everyone around me takes care of it all. I just have to look over the documents. Work is so easy.
I had never deliberately asked about Frank's work. Being the future president, I assumed he was handling his responsibilities commendably. But hearing their conversation made me suddenly anxious. Frank doesn't need to struggle. Leave the work to others, and you just enjoy your freedom. That's why we've surrounded you with competent people. Hearing Chanel's words, Frank nods obediently. Seeing this made me dizzy. Can a business really be run like this in today's world? Feeling a bit unsteady, I headed to the kitchen to make coffee. Then, "Could you not enter the kitchen without permission?" Chanel told me, stopping me in my tracks. "From today, that's my domain, so don't you dare enter without permission. And later, clean up all those tacky utensils you have there." Chanel said this without looking at me and then went back to conversing with Frank and Alex in the living room. I was so taken aback by the suddenness of it all that I just stood there, trying to process what was happening. Then Alex said, "Hey, how long is that outsider going to stand there? It's bothersome, so get lost." With that, he shooed me out of the living room like chasing away a dog. With my mind still not fully comprehending what had happened, I headed to my room. Finally managing to open the door and lock it, I just collapsed to the floor. Tears started to flow involuntarily. Frank, it's like they haven't accepted me at all. Can I really get along with Alex and Chanel from now on? With Frank acting the way he does, he'll definitely never stand up for me. I sat there, hugging my knees and crying. How much time has passed? Looking at the bedside clock, it was past 7 p.m. I left my room and quietly peeked into the living room. There, the three of them were enjoying a meal, seemingly prepared by Chanel. I couldn't tell what they were talking about, but they seemed to be having a good time. Just as I was about to sigh and return to my room, it happened. "Oh, Violet. Come here. We're going to be living together, so let's get along," Chanel said, surprising me. Her attitude was a complete turnaround from before. Alex also added,
"Chanel's cooking is really delicious. Please, have some."
With kind words I couldn't believe came from the same person who had shooed me away like a dog. As I nervously approached the dining table where they were sitting, Chanel pulled out a chair for me to sit.
"Right, Violet, we were talking about going to Australia next month. Mom and Dad love Australia and often visit, but we haven't had our honeymoon yet, have we? We thought it might be a good idea to combine the two."
The idea of a honeymoon was delightful, but the thought of going with Alex and Chanel was less appealing. However, if we're going to live together for a long time, maybe this trip could change our relationship. With hope, I decided to go on the trip to Australia. I've been thinking, and I realize that divorce can be unavoidable in some cases. After all, a husband and wife are ultimately strangers. I think your parents also had their reasons for their divorce. So, I'm not against divorce anymore, please be at ease," Chanel told me, and I felt a bit relieved. However, I couldn't help wondering why their attitudes had changed so drastically in just a few hours. Perhaps Frank had spoken to them. Even though he says his parents are the most important, he has always treated me with great care. Despite my lingering anxieties, I knew it was important to make an effort to meet them halfway. We're going to be sharing much of our lives together, so it's important to build a good relationship. I made up my mind to do just that. A month has passed, and today is the day of the trip to Australia. Honestly, I thought the arrival of Frank's parents marked the beginning of hell. Unexpectedly, I was accepted as a family member and have lived peacefully up to today. Alex and Chanel apparently hadn't sold their previous home and spent most of this month there. Perhaps not seeing Alex and Chanel often was why I was able to live peacefully. Frank would sometimes come home, but he started visiting his parents' house more frequently. Though I felt a bit lonely, I also enjoyed some freedom for the first time in a while. And today is the long-awaited family trip to Australia. Having not traveled with family since my mother passed away, I was genuinely looking forward to this day. I hope to deepen my relationship with Alex and Chanel on this trip and to be fully accepted as Frank's wife. Alex and Chanel and Frank were going to the airport directly from their house, so I took my luggage and headed to the airport myself. Since there's no airport in our town, I had to take a bus for several hours to a town that does. Even so, there's no direct flight to Australia, so I need to take a connecting flight domestically. It's quite a hassle, but the thought of an enjoyable trip makes it all worthwhile. Moreover, today is a special day for me. So, I believed this would indeed be a memorable trip. When I finally arrived at the airport, Alex and Chanel and Frank were already there, chatting happily. I ran up to them and said, "Good morning. You all are early." But no one responded, as if they hadn't heard me. As I tilted my head in confusion, Chanel turned to look at me. At the same time, "That doesn't matter. Give me Frank's passport," she said indifferently. I handed over Frank's passport, which I had brought from home, to Chanel. Chanel continued, "Traveling abroad is risky with cash, right? You didn't bring any, did you? If you did, I'll hold on to it for you. Hand over any cards to Frank." Not having much experience with overseas travel, I thought that was normal, so I handed over the cash I brought for emergencies to Chanel and all my credit cards to Frank. Then, Frank approached me and handed me an envelope. "Violet, this is a love letter from me. Thank you for everything." Frank was smiling at me. A love letter? What does "thank you for everything" mean? Though I had many questions, Frank and Chanel seemed oddly relieved. Alex, who had been silent until now, stood up from the bench he was sitting on.
"All right, time to board."
At his words, Frank and Chanel started to move. I was completely lost.
Excuse me. I haven't checked in yet. Where's my plane ticket?"
As I said this, Frank, Alex, and Chanel turned around. Sighing, Alex and Chanel stepped aside, and Frank, still smiling broadly, said,
"Violet, today's a family trip, so we're going to have fun just with the family."
As I stood there speechless, Chanel spoke up. "You really can't take a hint, can you? Stupidity must run in the family. Oh, how dreadful. What kind of upbringing did your mother provide you with? I really despise dealing with such stupid poor people. Did you actually think you could become part of our family? I've mentioned this before, haven't I? I'm not opposed to the idea of divorce. So, please go ahead and divorce Frank. It's a good thing you haven't had any children yet." Opening the envelope Frank had given me, I found a completed divorce application form inside.
"Violet, I'm going to marry this woman next. She's wealthy, and her parents are well off. After we return from Australia, I plan to meet her and start dating. She's closer to my ideal than you are. So, make sure you submit that love letter, okay?"
Frank showed me a photo of a woman on his mobile phone screen. Indeed, she looked like Frank's type. No, that's not the point. It's unacceptable to declare marriage to another woman while still married to me. Violet, even if you try to sue, it's pointless. Frank hasn't done anything wrong now. What's wrong with a man choosing a woman strategically? I bet your father was a terrible man too. Probably committed adultery and that led to the divorce, right? Alex said this with a mocking laugh. I felt a surge of anger rising from the core of my being.
Let's not waste any more time and go. Oh, by the way, the hotel we're staying at in Australia is from the famous Garcia Group in the US. They've just expanded into Australia and it's quite popular. I was worried we wouldn't get a reservation, but when I mentioned our company, Miller Corporation, they gladly accepted. They said we'd receive special treatment upon arrival. We're welcomed at luxury hotels because of who we are. Your presence lowers our standing. It's obvious, isn't it? Chanel said this and headed towards the boarding gate, pulling her carry-on behind her. Frank also waved at me as he passed through the boarding gate. That's when I realized something. I had handed over all my cash and cards to Chanel and Frank. I didn't have any money to get home. Noticing my dilemma, Alex said, "Violet, you might as well sleep on the streets." He left through the gate with those parting words. Knowing I couldn't do anything, I said, "Understood," and just stood there. The airport's announcements were audible. It seemed the plane carrying them to Australia had just taken off. I sat down on a nearby bench and absent-mindedly looked at the silver ring on my finger. Looking at the ring, various memories with Frank flashed through my mind. After some thought, I made a call. A few minutes later, after ending the call, I tried to calm my trembling heart filled with anger by taking deep breaths. I remembered Chanel's words. "I've changed my mind about divorce." They must have been planning to divorce me from that moment. That's why she said her views on divorce had changed. And Chanel insulted my mother. She had no idea how my mother struggled to raise and educate me. Being from a single-parent family doesn't justify disdain. Alex insulted my father. He judged my dad by his own standards, deciding arbitrarily on his character. Though we didn't live together, my dad always cared for me. When times were tough, he secretly helped my mom out. No matter what anyone says, my dad is important to me. I won't tolerate insults against him. The Frank who used to send me bouquets on my birthday is gone. I've taken your love letter to heart. Frank, you don't remember what day it is, do you? I didn't want to receive such a love letter on this day. But is this really what you think? Have you ever considered what you truly want? Either way, you've chosen your parents. That's all there is to it. Goodbye. Go straight to hell on that plane. I will never forgive you. About a week after they left for their trip to Australia, my mobile phone rang. Seeing Frank displayed on the screen, I let out a deep sigh. Reluctantly, I pressed the answer button, thinking I'd listen to what he had to say one last time. "Hello, if it's..." "Hey you! Where are you right now?" Chanel's loud voice cut me off. Hearing the voice I least wanted to hear, I felt a surge of discomfort. It doesn't matter where I am anymore, right? It's about time for you to return from Australia. Congratulations on your safe return, then. I tried to end the call, but Chanel seemed to still have more to yell about. "Wait a minute. We're not done talking. Why aren't you at home? All your stuff is gone. You should be there to welcome Frank back." Why would I be at home? Waiting for my husband to return? Confused by Chanel's words, I told her the facts. "That's no longer my home, and I no longer have a husband. It seems you've dialed the wrong number, so I'll be hanging up now." Just as I was about to hang up, I heard Chanel's voice shout, "What's with this woman?" I thought to myself, that's exactly what I should be saying to you. Violet. It's me, Frank. Something happened in Australia, and Mom's quite upset. Violet, aren't you coming back to our place?" I firmly said, "I won't be returning. After all, it's no longer my home." "Frank, can you put the phone on speaker and tell me what happened in Australia?"
Frank did what I said and turned his mobile phone into a speaker. Frank did as I asked, and I could hear Chanel complaining in the background. According to Frank, their stay in Australia went like this. A few hours after their flight, they landed safely in Australia. They proudly headed to a hotel managed by the Garcia Group. When they announced themselves at the check-in desk, the staff reacted and signaled something. Suddenly, people in the hotel's spacious lobby started dancing around Frank's family. Likely a flash mob. Frank, Alex, and Chanel, not understanding what was happening, assumed they were being welcomed. Guests around them clapped in rhythm to the music and dance. Confetti flew, and crackers were popped. The dancers struck a final pose. And then, the words that were,
"Happy birthday, Violet,"
released were. Naturally, Frank's family was taken aback. Among the applause from the surrounding guests, a beautiful hotel employee brought over a large cake on a wagon.
"Happy birthday." "Where's Violet?"
asked by the woman.
"I'm Violet,"
Chanel reluctantly said. But then, the woman loudly proclaimed, "But Violet should be turning 36 this year." In the lobby. This caused laughter among the guests and the flash mob alike. Clearly, it was a stretch for Chanel, who is turning 66, to pass for 36. Chanel's face turned red, and the Frank family quickly took the cake and retreated to their room.
"How dare you? Embarrassing me like this when you're not even here. You're unbelievable."
Frank and Alex had a hard time calming down an angry Chanel. In search of a change of scenery, they went shopping in the hotel shops, only to be greeted everywhere with,
"Where is Violet?"
The stress Chanel must have felt, being asked this at every shop, must have been significant. After being asked for the umpteenth time,
"Violet isn't here. She didn't come to Australia. Enough already."
Chanel burst out in anger. Then, a shop assistant said, "Why isn't Violet here?"
"Princess Violet is the star of today."
Hearing this, Chanel decided she had had enough of walking around the hotel that day. Hearing this story made me burst into laughter.
"What are you laughing at? Don't laugh. What's this about Princess Violet? It's all your fault."
I heard Chanel muttering something behind Frank, but I decided to ignore it for now.
Yes, the Garcia Group hotels take their guests' birthdays very seriously. They have a concept of making the guest's special day memorable with special arrangements, which is popular among their customers.
From the next day onwards, the "Where is Violet?" interrogations ceased, and they reportedly enjoyed a relatively fun Australian life. It seems there was a guest who recorded the entire sequence of events, including the flash mob dance. Chanel declaring herself as Violet was captured on film, and now, that short video is somewhat trending in America.
That popular hotel accepted our reservation because of our company's name. It's proof that our company has grown and gained recognition. Be thankful for that."
Chanel said this with a huff, and Alex, who hadn't said much until then, chimed in.
"After all, our company has significant investors. Seems like a businessman is personally investing. It's proof that our company's future is recognized."
Alex, being the president, clearly took pride in his company. I wondered about Frank.
"Hey Frank, was the company okay while you were gone? Did you manage the handover properly?"
Frank seemed puzzled over the phone.
"What do you mean, handover? I didn't say anything to the company. I've never told anyone when I take time off or go back. I didn't tell anyone this time either."
Hearing this, Alex asked in surprise.
"You didn't do a handover? Not even to the executives? Is everything okay?" Haven't you received any calls from the company?
Reminded by Alex, Frank said.
Oh, I left my company mobile at home. Let me check.
After checking his room, Frank exclaimed over the phone.
What is this? It seems like the company called a lot. 500 missed calls.
Suddenly, the phone became noisy, with apparent trouble brewing.
Violet. It's an emergency. I'll call you back.
With that, the call ended. I felt no sympathy for them, considering it was his responsibility. Weeks later, I had some business at Frank's house and decided to visit. When I rang the doorbell, Frank answered, even though it was the middle of a weekday. Oh, Violet. You've come back. Frank looked a bit haggard. No, that's not it. I came to return this, I said, handing over a small bag containing the silver ring. It was no longer needed by me, but too valuable to simply throw away, so I decided to return it to its original owner. Despite my lack of sympathy, I was curious about their current situation. Frank accepted the ring, his face a mix of emotions, looking almost like he was about to cry. I thought it was unfair for him to make such a face. If he was going to make that face, I wished he had stood by his decisions from the start. But such wishes were now empty. And nothing could change the fact that we were over. Then, the tearful Frank spoke. The company, everyone working there, they've quit. I had suspected some kind of trouble at the company, but didn't imagine that all the employees would leave. According to Frank, he had indeed left for Australia without arranging any handover. With no one to make important decisions in his absence, the company faced a crisis. No one could reach Frank by phone, causing inconvenience to multiple business partners. Exhausted by Frank's actions, the executives who had supported him decided to resign one after another. Feeling the company's situation turning dire, other employees also took the opportunity to resign. Effectively, the branch Frank was in charge of ceased to function. Urged by Frank, I entered the house. In the living room, a weary Chanel was sitting on the sofa. Alex was seemingly running around trying to manage the situation. Frank, deemed better off not moving, was on home standby. What are you doing here? You, a lowly poor person, wouldn't understand the troubles we have. Her rudeness was unchanged. I felt a slight urge to help, but Chanel's words quickly dispelled it. Chanel, no souvenirs from Australia? Being left at the airport is pretty harsh, isn't it? I said this with a smile, laced with sarcasm. Chanel glared at me. How did you get back that day? You shouldn't have had any money. Ah, so taking my cash and cards was deliberate after all. Yes, I was in quite a bind. So, I called my dad. He told me to stay at one of his hotels nearby for the night. Frank and Chanel's eyes widened at my words. It seemed they didn't understand what I meant.
Luckily, there was a room available. It was my birthday that day, so I received the same flash mob celebration at the hotel you guys experienced. It was very touching.
Chanel's face turned red. The memories of that day must have been traumatic for her. Then, with her face still red, she asked me.
The same celebration? Which hotel did you stay at? Surely not.
I answered with a smile.
Yes, the same Garcia Group Hotel. They have a wide network, and there was one near the airport.
Chanel seemed even more confused. She keeps asking me questions with wide eyes.
Wait. Even we barely managed to book a room there. How could someone like you stay at such a hotel without a reservation?
Before I could answer Chanel's question, a loud noise came from the entrance, and Alex entered the living room.
It's terrible. Our main investor said they're pulling out. It's over.
Alex sat down, holding his head. Frank, realizing the gravity of the situation, looked panicked, his face pale. Chanel, who had been red-faced moments ago, now turned pale, looking despairingly at Alex. Just a few weeks ago, these same people who had looked down on me and laughed joyously were now in despair. Having lost everything. Yes, this is what I wanted to see. Those who disparaged my mother, insulted my father, betrayed and scorned me, now in despair and suffering. My father was very happy when Frank and I got married. He wanted the prosperity of Frank and Alex's company, so he invested personally, considering you all as precious family. But you despised me for being from a single-parent family and ultimately betrayed me in the cruelest way. My father said there was no reason to invest in such people anymore. With that, I left the house. I thought I heard their cries of anguish, but I didn't look back. I was no longer family to them. Perhaps we were never really a family from the beginning. I knew that the hotel we were supposed to stay at in Australia was managed by my real father. When a reservation request came in under the Miller name, my father made an effort to secure the booking. However, I didn't go to Australia. I didn't cancel the grand birthday welcome intentionally, to humiliate them. It was something I had asked my father to do. The reason my parents divorced was due to the common issue of drifting apart in their daily lives. My father, who had just started his company at that time, was incredibly busy every day. He now regrets that period deeply and cares a great deal about me. I also know how deeply saddened he was when my mother passed away. Even though we are apart, we are still a family. Frank. We are no longer a family, but I hope you will become more responsible and support your beloved parents. In the end, the only thing you can rely on is the bond of the heart that ties a family together. Later, I heard through the grapevine that Miller Corporation, Alex's company, had gone bankrupt. I think there was no future for that company the moment they considered making Frank the next president. One day, I saw someone who looked a lot like Frank at a construction site near my home. It was just for a moment, so I'm not sure if it was really him. Would Frank be sweating and doing physical labor? But part of me hopes it was him. I hope he becomes someone who can work hard to support his family. That's my final wish. Now, I'm training to become a staff member at the hotel managed by my father. It's a challenging job, but I take pride in doing something that brings smiles to people's faces. I've even learned the flash mob dance, looking forward to welcoming birthday guests to the hotel. Recently, I visited my mother's grave with my father. We prayed together and told her about recent events. Then, a strong wind blew, and we joked. Maybe Mom is laughing now? And we laughed together. Remembering this, my walkie-talkie crackles with a signal. It seems a birthday guest has checked in. All right. I brace myself and quickly head to the lobby, imagining the smiling faces of the guests waiting there.